This mother bear saw a bear cub on the billboard and was in tears. The reason was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun barely pierced through the thick blanket of fog that covered Pine Ridge Forest. The tall trees stood like silent guardians, their branches heavy with dew. Deep within this forest lived Luna, a mother bear known by local rangers for her distinctive white patch of fur on her chest. For the past 3 years, Luna had roamed these woods, foraging for berries, fishing in the clear streams, and raising her only cub, Coda. Luna woke up early that morning. Something felt different. The air smelled of change and human activity. She stretched her massive body and nudged her sleeping cub, but there was no response. Luna looked around their den, the small hollow at the base of an old oak tree, but Coda wasn't there. At first, she didn't worry. Coda was curious and playful, often exploring the area around their den while she slept. Luna let out a low grunt, a sound she used to call her little one back home. No response came. Luna stepped out of the den, her nose high in the air, trying to catch Coda's scent. She circled the area, her movements becoming more frantic with each passing minute. The cub's scent led toward the edge of the forest, near where humans often came to camp. Luna followed the trail, her heart beating faster as she moved closer to the border between her world and the world of humans. The forest ended abruptly, where the newly constructed highway cut through the landscape. Luna rarely ventured this close to the road, but Coda's scent pulled her forward. Cars zoomed by, their metal bodies gleaming in the morning light. Luna hesitated at the tree line, her instincts warning her of danger, but her need to find Coda was stronger than her fear. Oliver Reed, a wildlife photographer, had parked his truck on the side of the highway. He had been coming to this spot for weeks, hoping to capture images of the forest's inhabitants for his new book. Oliver had set up his camera on a tripod and was adjusting his lens when he noticed movement at the edge of the forest. Through his viewfinder, he saw Luna emerge from the trees. "Incredible," Oliver whispered to himself, quickly taking a series of photos. He had heard about Luna from the local rangers but had never been lucky enough to see her until now. Luna stood at the edge of the forest, her nose working overtime to track Coda's scent. The trail led her along the border of the woods, parallel to the highway. She moved cautiously, keeping a safe distance from the rush of traffic. Then, suddenly, she stopped. Her body tensed, and her gaze fixed on something across the road. There, on the other side of the highway, stood a massive billboard that hadn't been there the day before. The construction crew had just finished putting it up late yesterday evening. The billboard showed a bear cub in a small cage, its eyes wide with fear. Below the image, bold letters read, "Wildlife trafficking breaks families apart. Report illegal animal trade." Luna stared at the billboard, her body completely still. Oliver, confused by the bear's behavior, followed her gaze. What he saw next sent shivers down his spine. Luna let out a deep, mournful cry, a sound so human-like in its grief that Oliver's hand trembled as he raised his camera again. The mother bear was staring at the billboard, and if Oliver didn't know better, he would swear she was crying. Tears, actual tears, seemed to form in her eyes as she looked at the image of the caged cub. Luna rose on her hind legs, as if trying to get a better look, and then dropped back down with a heavy thud. She paced back and forth, her eyes never leaving the billboard. Oliver couldn't believe what he was seeing. Could Luna recognize her own cub in that photo? Was that even possible? He knew bears had good memories and strong bonds with their cubs, But this level of recognition seemed almost too human. As if in a trance, Luna began to move toward the highway. Oliver's heart raced. If she tried to cross the busy road, she would surely be hit by a car. "No, no, no," Oliver muttered, reaching for his phone. He needed to call the wildlife rangers before something terrible happened. But before he could dial, he saw another car pull up behind his truck. A woman stepped out, her uniform identifying her as Park Ranger Mia Chen. Luna paused at the edge of the road, still fixated on the billboard. Her mournful sounds continued, drawing the attention of passing drivers. Some slowed down, others honked their horns in alarm. The commotion only added to the tension of the moment. Oliver waved Mia over. "I think we have a situation," he said, pointing toward Luna. "That bear has been staring at the billboard for minutes now. I think she recognizes the cub in the photo." Mia followed his gaze and frowned. "That's Luna. And you're right, that cub in the billboard photo, it looks exactly like her cub, Coda. We've been monitoring them for conservation studies." Her expression darkened. "Coda went missing 3 days ago. We've been searching for him, worried he might have been taken by poachers." "So, that could actually be her cub on the billboard?" Oliver asked, his voice barely a whisper. Mia nodded slowly. The conservation group must have used a stock photo for their campaign, not knowing it would be put up right where Coda's mother lives. She reached for her radio. "I need to make some calls. This is too much of a coincidence." As they watched, Luna let out another heart-wrenching cry. This time, it was so loud and full of sorrow that several cars came to a complete stop on the highway. Drivers got out, pointing and taking videos with their phones. Luna seemed oblivious to the growing audience, her attention entirely on the billboard image of a cub that looked remarkably like her missing Coda. Oliver's camera clicked rapidly, capturing every moment of Luna's unusual behavior. In all his years of wildlife photography, he had never witnessed anything like this. It was as if the barrier between animal and human emotion had momentarily disappeared, revealing a universal language of grief and loss that transcended species. What none of them knew yet was how tangled this story would become, how Luna's apparent recognition of her cub would spark a chain of events that would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone who witnessed this extraordinary moment. The truth behind Coda's disappearance was more shocking than any of them could imagine, and Luna's journey to find him had only just begun. The crowd along the highway continued to grow. Some drivers had pulled completely off the road, creating an impromptu audience for Luna's display of grief. Oliver kept photographing, his finger pressing the shutter button almost automatically as he witnessed something he'd never seen in 20 years of wildlife photography. "We need to get these people back in their cars," Mia said, reaching for the loudspeaker attached to her ranger vehicle. This situation could get dangerous fast. Oliver nodded, but couldn't tear his eyes away from Luna. The bear had begun pawing at the ground, her massive claws digging into the earth as if she were trying to channel her distress. Every few seconds she would look up at the billboard, let out another mournful sound, then resume her digging. "Wait," Oliver said suddenly, lowering his camera. "Look at her behavior. She's not trying to cross the road anymore. It's like she's mourning." Mia paused, the loudspeaker halfway to her lips. She'd worked with wildlife for 15 years, but even she had to admit this was unusual. Bears are intelligent, but this level of recognition and emotional response. She shook her head. "It's extraordinary." While Mia began directing traffic and asking people to return to their vehicles, Oliver noticed a black SUV pulling up behind the growing line of cars. The door opened, and a man in a crisp suit stepped out. Something about his deliberate movements caught Oliver's attention. The man wasn't gawking like the other bystanders. He seemed to be assessing the situation with calculated interest. The man approached one of the rangers who had arrived to help Mia. After a brief conversation, he flashed some kind of identification. The ranger's expression changed immediately, and he pointed toward Mia. The man nodded and began walking in their direction. "Ranger Chen?" The man extended his hand when he reached them. "I'm Agent Marcus Blackwood, Department of Wildlife Protection. I understand you have a situation with a bear responding to our anti-trafficking billboard." Mia shook his hand, her expression cautious. "Yes, that's right. We believe the cub in that photo resembles a local cub that went missing 3 days ago. The mother bear seems to recognize it." Agent Blackwood's face revealed nothing. "Interesting coincidence. That image was taken from our database of rescued animals. The cub in the photo was actually confiscated during a raid on a trafficking operation near the Canadian border last month." Oliver, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. "So it's not the same cub? It can't be Coda?" Agent Blackwood turned to him with a cool gaze. "And you are?" "Oliver Reed, wildlife photographer. I've been documenting the local wildlife here for my new book." The agent nodded curtly. "Mr. Reed, the cub in that photo is currently at our rehabilitation facility in Burlington. It's being prepared for eventual release back into the wild." "But the resemblance must be uncanny," Oliver insisted, showing Blackwood some of the photos on his camera's display screen. "This mother bear is clearly distressed by what she sees." Blackwood barely glanced at the photos. "Bears are unpredictable, Mr. Reed. This one could be agitated by the colors on the billboard, the human scent from the construction crew, or a dozen other factors. Attributing human emotions to wildlife is a common but misguided tendency." Something in the agent's dismissive tone made Oliver uneasy. He had spent enough time around wildlife to know when someone was reciting textbook knowledge rather than speaking from experience. Meanwhile, Luna had stopped digging and was now sitting motionless, staring at the billboard with such intensity that several of the onlookers had fallen silent, as if witnessing something sacred. The morning fog had burned away, and the sun now cast long shadows across the scene. "What happened to the trafficking operation?" Mia asked Agent Blackwood. "Were any arrests made?" "That's classified information, Ranger Chen," Blackwood replied. "What I can tell you is that we've been tracking a sophisticated network operating throughout the Northwest. They specialize in exotic animals, including bear cubs for the international pet trade." As they spoke, Oliver noticed something strange. Luna had tilted her head, as if listening to their conversation. He knew it was impossible. They were too far away for her to hear them, and even if she could, bears couldn't understand human speech. Yet the timing was unsettling. "I'm going to need you to clear this area," Agent Blackwood continued, addressing both Mia and Oliver. "We can't have civilians interfering with the protected species, and I'll need copies of any photos you've taken, Mr. Reed." Oliver clutched his camera instinctively. "These photos are for my book. I have all the proper permits to photograph in this area." "This is now a federal investigation," Blackwood countered smoothly. "That billboard was placed here as part of an ongoing operation. Your photographs could compromise our work." Before Oliver could argue further, a commotion erupted from the crowd. Luna was on the move, not toward the highway as they had feared, but back toward the forest. She cast one last glance at the billboard, then disappeared into the trees with surprising speed for an animal of her size. "Where is she going?" Mia wondered aloud. "Probably back to her den," Blackwood answered. "Bears don't maintain interest in one thing for long. Their attention spans are limited." Oliver frowned at this. Everything he had observed about Luna suggested the opposite. She was focused, determined, and seemingly driven by a specific purpose. Her retreat into the forest didn't feel like lost interest, it felt strategic. As the crowd began to disperse under the direction of the rangers, Oliver pulled Mia aside. "Something doesn't add up," he whispered. "That agent knows more than he's telling us." Mia glanced toward Blackwood, who was now speaking into a radio. "What are you suggesting?" "I don't know yet," Oliver admitted, "but I've studied animal behavior for decades. What we just witnessed was not normal bear behavior, no matter what Blackwood says, and his sudden appearance right after Luna's reaction to the billboard, that's too convenient." Mia looked torn. As a ranger, she was trained to defer to federal authorities, but her instincts were sending warning signals. "What do you propose we do?" "Follow Luna," Oliver said without hesitation. "I have tracking equipment in my truck. If she's returning to her den, maybe she's going to look for more signs of coda. If we observe her behavior, we might learn something that Agent Blackwood doesn't want us to know." "That would be against protocol," Mia reminded him, "and potentially dangerous." Oliver glanced back at Blackwood, who was now typing something into his phone with a frown on his face. "More dangerous than letting a federal agent with questionable motives handle a situation involving a potentially trafficked bear cub." Mia's expression hardened with resolve. "Give me 5 minutes to make it look like I'm leaving. Meet me at the service road half a mile north of here." Oliver nodded and began packing his camera equipment. As he loaded everything into his truck, he couldn't shake the image of Luna's eyes as she stared at the billboard. The unmistakable look of recognition, of loss, of determination. Whatever was happening here went beyond normal animal behavior, beyond coincidence, and possibly beyond the law. What Oliver and Mia didn't know was that they weren't the only ones planning to track Luna. From his SUV, Agent Blackwood watched them through narrowed eyes. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a number. "Sir, we have a situation," he said quietly. "The mother bear has seen the billboard, and we have a photographer and a ranger who are asking too many questions." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "Yes, sir, I understand. The operation must not be compromised." As he hung up, Blackwood's gaze drifted to the billboard across the highway. The bear cub's frightened eyes stared back at him. A silent accusation that he quickly dismissed from his mind. He had a job to do, and sentimentality had no place in it. He started his vehicle and pulled away, careful to maintain a discreet distance from Oliver's truck. Deep in the forest, Luna moved with purpose. Her grief had transformed into something else, a primal determination that drove her forward. She wasn't returning to her empty den, she was following another scent, one that had been masked by the overwhelming smells of the highway and the humans. But now, away from those distractions, she could detect it clearly. The faint trace of her cub, leading deeper into the forest, toward the old abandoned ranger station that humans had not used in many seasons. The station that, unknown to Luna, had recently seen new activity under the cover of darkness. The dirt path to the old ranger station was overgrown and barely visible, but Luna followed it unerringly, her nose low to the ground. The scent of her cub grew stronger with each step, mixing with unfamiliar human smells and the sharp tang of metal and chemicals. These strange odors would normally have sent her retreating into the safety of the deep woods, but not today. Today, she was driven by an instinct more powerful than fear, the need to find her cub. Half a mile behind her, Oliver and Mia made their way through the dense undergrowth, following the tracking device Oliver had activated. Years ago, as part of a conservation study, Luna had been briefly captured and fitted with a small tracking chip embedded in her ear tag. Most rangers had forgotten about these older tracking systems, but Oliver, who had documented the original study for National Geographic, remembered. "The signal's getting stronger," Oliver whispered, checking the small handheld device. "She's moving with purpose, not wandering." Mia nodded, her expression troubled. "This path leads to the old Pinewood station. It was decommissioned 5 years ago due to budget cuts." "Nobody should be out there." Oliver raised an eyebrow. "Maybe somebody is." They continued in silence, careful to stay downwind of Luna's path. The forest grew denser around them, the sunlight filtering through the canopy in dappled patterns that shifted with the breeze. Under different circumstances, Oliver would have been stopping every few minutes to photograph the pristine wilderness. Today, his camera remained in his backpack as they followed Luna's trail. After 20 minutes of hiking, Mia suddenly grabbed Oliver's arm, pulling him down behind a fallen log. "Listen," she hissed. Through the trees ahead, they could hear voices, men's voices, speaking in low, urgent tones. Mia and Oliver exchanged glances. They had expected to find Luna at her den, perhaps searching for signs of her missing cub. They hadn't expected to find humans deep in this restricted part of the forest. "We should get closer," Oliver whispered. Mia hesitated, then nodded. "But carefully. If Luna is nearby, we're between her and people she might see as a threat." They crept forward, using the dense underbrush as cover. As they drew nearer to the voices, the old ranger station came into view through the trees. The small wooden structure looked much as it had when it was abandoned years ago, except for the new satellite dish mounted on the roof and the 2 black SUVs parked beside it. "Those look like government vehicles," Mia whispered. Before Oliver could respond, movement caught his eye. Luna had emerged from the trees on the opposite side of the small clearing that surrounded the station. She stood motionless, watching the building with the same intensity she had shown at the billboard. 2 men exited the station, both wearing the same crisp suits as Agent Blackwood. One carried a metal case. The other held a tablet device. They were so engaged in their conversation that they didn't notice Luna at first. "Shipments ready for transport," the man with the case was saying. "The buyer in Beijing is getting impatient." "Tell them quality specimens take time," the other replied. "The last cub we sent had stress marks on its pelt. We can't afford another complaint." Luna let out a low growl, and both men spun around, finally spotting her at the edge of the clearing. One reached inside his jacket, presumably for a weapon. "Don't," the other cautioned. "Just get inside." "She won't approach the building." But Luna did exactly that. With a determination that defied normal bear behavior, she began walking directly toward the station. The men retreated quickly inside, slamming the door behind them. "Did you hear that?" Mia whispered, her face pale. "They're trafficking cubs. That man mentioned a pelt." Oliver felt sick. And they mentioned a shipment. What if Coda is still here? What if they haven't transported him yet? Mia's hand moved to the radio at her belt, then stopped. Who do I even call? If Agent Blackwood is involved, we need proof first, Oliver said, raising his camera with its telephoto lens. He began taking photos of the station, the vehicles, and Luna, who had now reached the front porch of the building. To their amazement, Luna rose on her hind legs and began pawing at the door, leaving deep scratches in the wood. The behavior was so deliberate, so human-like in its purpose that both Oliver and Mia stared in disbelief. "She knows," Mia whispered. "Somehow, she knows Coda is in there." Inside the station, they could hear the men shouting, though the words were muffled by the walls. A window on the side of the building slid open, and one of the men leaned out with what looked like a tranquilizer gun. Without thinking, Oliver stood up from their hiding place. "Hey!" he shouted. The man with the gun turned, spotted Oliver, and hesitated just long enough for Luna to notice the open window. With a burst of speed that belied her size, she charged around the side of the building. The man pulled back inside hastily, sliding the window shut just as Luna reached it. "What are you doing?" Mia hissed, pulling Oliver back down. "You've just announced our presence to wildlife traffickers." "I couldn't let them shoot her," Oliver said. "Besides, now they're distracted. Look." Luna was circling the building, testing each window and door with her paws and nose. Her movements were frantic but purposeful. At the back of the station she paused, her head lifted as if catching a scent. Then she began digging at an old cellar entrance, partially concealed by overgrown bushes. There must be a basement, Mia realized. Many of these old stations had root cellars or storage areas below ground. Luna's digging became more urgent, her massive paws tearing away at the rotted wood of the cellar doors. From inside the station they could hear more shouting and what sounded like items being hastily moved. "They're destroying evidence," Mia said. "We need to act now." Oliver nodded and handed her his spare camera. "Take photos of everything. I'll create a distraction." Before Mia could stop him, Oliver was moving through the trees, circling around to approach the station from the front while keeping out of sight of the windows. Mia cursed under her breath, but raised the camera and began documenting Luna's determined efforts to break into the cellar. Oliver reached the front of the station and crouched behind one of the black SUVs. He pulled out his pocket knife and quickly punctured 2 of the tires, ensuring the vehicles wouldn't be going anywhere soon. Then he picked up a heavy branch from the ground and, with all his strength, hurled it through the front window of the station. Glass shattered, and immediately the front door burst open. One of the agents rushed out, gun drawn. Oliver was already running, making as much noise as possible as he crashed through the underbrush. The agent fired once, a warning shot, and then pursued. With the attention directed toward the front of the building, Luna's efforts at the cellar went unnoticed. Her claws finally splintered one of the old wooden doors, creating an opening large enough for her to force her head and shoulders through. The remaining wood gave way with a crack, and Luna disappeared into the darkness below the station. Mia, still hidden in the trees, continued taking photos. She captured the agent chasing after Oliver, the broken cellar door, and then aimed her lens at the remaining windows of the station. Through one, she could see the second agent frantically packing items into a duffel bag. He kept glancing toward a door in the floor, likely leading to the same cellar Luna had just entered. Suddenly, a series of crashes came from beneath the station, followed by the unmistakable roar of an enraged bear. The agent inside the building froze, then abandoned his packing and rushed for the front door. As he exited, Mia captured his face clearly in a photograph. A moment later, there was another sound from the cellar. Not a roar this time, but a series of soft grunts and whimpers. Mia's heart raced. Those weren't the sounds of an adult bear. Despite the danger, she had to see what was happening. Keeping low, she ran across the clearing to the broken cellar entrance. Peering into the darkness, she allowed her eyes to adjust. What she saw made her gasp. The cellar was small, lined with metal cages stacked against the walls. Most were empty, but in one, a small bear cub was huddled in the corner, trembling. And before that cage stood Luna, trying to reach her paw through the bars to touch her cub. It was Coda. There was no mistaking the distinctive white patch on his chest, the same marking that Luna had passed to her offspring. Mia fumbled for her flashlight, shining it into the cellar to get better photos. In the improved light, she could see more clearly the conditions of the cellar. Beyond the cages, there were tables with surgical equipment, bottles of chemicals, and what looked like tanning tools. On one table lay several small pelts, their fur still glossy. Fighting back nausea, Mia took photo after photo. Then she turned her attention to Luna and Coda. The mother bear had managed to reach a single claw through the cage bars, and Coda was nuzzling against it, making soft whimpering sounds. The tenderness of the moment, contrasted with the horror of their surroundings, brought tears to Mia's eyes. A gunshot echoed through the forest, followed by a shout. Oliver. Mia's heart lurched. She had to help him, but she couldn't leave Luna and Coda. Making a split-second decision, Mia climbed down into the cellar. Luna whirled around, snarling at the intrusion. Mia froze, holding up her hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm here to help," she said softly, knowing that while Luna couldn't understand her words, the tone might help. "I'm going to get Coda out." Luna watched her with suspicious eyes but didn't charge. Whether this was due to some level of understanding or simply her focus on her cub, Mia couldn't say. Slowly, keeping her movements deliberate and unthreatening, Mia approached the cage. The lock was a simple padlock. Mia searched the nearby tables until she found a heavy pair of bolt cutters, likely used by the traffickers for their own grim purposes. With a single snap, the lock broke, and Mia carefully opened the cage door. Coda cowered at first, but Luna made a soft grunting sound that seemed to reassure him. After a moment's hesitation, the cub darted out of the cage and into his mother's waiting embrace. Luna curled protectively around her cub, nuzzling and licking him as if checking for injuries. Mia continued taking photos, documenting the reunion and the evidence of trafficking. Then she heard footsteps above. Someone was returning to the station. She gestured urgently to Luna. "You need to go," she whispered. "Go back to the forest." As if understanding, Luna scooped Coda up by the scruff of his neck and moved toward the broken cellar doors. She paused at the exit, turning to look back at Mia with an expression that, in a human, might have been gratitude. Then she was gone, disappearing into the trees with her precious cargo. Mia quickly climbed out after them, not wanting to be trapped in the cellar when the agents returned. As she emerged, she found herself face to face with Agent Blackwood, his gun pointed directly at her chest. "Ranger Chen," he said coldly, "you've just interfered with a federal operation. That's a serious offense." "Wildlife trafficking is a more serious one," Mia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She glanced around for any sign of Oliver, but saw nothing. "Where's Oliver Reed?" Blackwood's expression revealed nothing. "Mr. Reed is being detained for trespassing on federal land and interfering with an authorized operation." "Authorized?" Mia couldn't keep the disgust from her voice. "You're selling bear cubs to international buyers. You're skinning them for their pelts." "You have no idea what you're talking about," Blackwood replied smoothly. "This is a complex undercover operation targeting international trafficking networks. Everything you've seen here is part of our cover." "Including the cub I just released? Coda? The cub that matches exactly with the one on your billboard?" For the first time, Blackwood's composure slipped. "You released it? Do you have any idea what you've done? That specimen was worth—" He caught himself, but it was too late. Mia smiled grimly. "Worth what, Agent Blackwood? What's the going rate for a bear cub's life these days?" Blackwood's face hardened. "Hand over the camera, Ranger Chen. This is a matter of national security." "I think it's a matter for the actual Department of Wildlife Protection," Mia countered. "The real one, not whatever corrupt division you're working for." Before Blackwood could respond, the sound of vehicles approaching filled the clearing. Through the trees, Mia could see the flashing lights of ranger vehicles and what looked like state police cars. Blackwood's eyes widened in genuine surprise. "What did you do?" he demanded. Mia held up her own radio. "I called for backup as soon as I saw those pelts. Did you really think all rangers use the same frequency? Some of us have private channels for emergencies." The first vehicles pulled into the clearing, and uniformed officers emerged with weapons drawn. Among them, Mia recognized the regional director of wildlife services, her actual boss. Blackwood lowered his gun slowly, his mind visibly calculating his options. Then, with a sudden movement, he lunged for Mia's camera. She twisted away, but he managed to grab it from her hands. Before anyone could stop him, he smashed it against a tree, shattering it. "No evidence," he said with a cold smile. Mia matched his smile. "Except for the backup memory card in my pocket, and Oliver's photos wherever he is." Blackwood's smile vanished as the officers surrounded him, ordering him to drop his weapon and lie on the ground. As he was being handcuffed, he looked up at Mia with hatred in his eyes. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he spat. "This goes higher than you can imagine." "Maybe," Mia acknowledged, "but today you're the one in handcuffs." As the officers led Blackwood away, the regional director approached Mia. "Where's the photographer who called this in?" he asked. Mia's heart skipped. "Oliver called you?" The director nodded. "About 20 minutes ago, said there was a wildlife trafficking operation run by corrupt federal agents. He sent some photos to our secure server, then said he was being pursued." Mia looked toward the forest where Oliver had led the other agent. "We need to find him. Now." Teams of officers spread out through the forest, calling Oliver's name. Mia joined the search, her mind racing with possibilities. Few of them good. If the agent had caught up to Oliver. She pushed the thought away and focused on the search. After 30 tense minutes, a shout went up from the eastern section of the forest. Mia ran toward the sound, her heart in her throat. When she arrived, she found Oliver sitting on a fallen log, looking disheveled but very much alive. A ranger was checking a nasty gash on his forehead. "You're okay," Mia exclaimed, relief flooding through her. Oliver grinned weakly. "Define okay." "I took a tumble down a ravine trying to lose that agent. Hit my head on the way down. When I came to, he was gone. Probably went back to the station when he heard the vehicles arriving." "We caught Blackwood," Mia told him. "The other agent is still at large, but they'll find him." She sat down beside Oliver. "You called for backup?" "Figured it was worth a try." Oliver shrugged. "I remembered the regional director's number from an article I wrote last year. Called him while I was running for my life. Multitasking at its finest." Mia laughed, the sound tinged with lingering adrenaline and relief. "Luna and Coda got away. I freed him from the cage. You should have seen their reunion, Oliver. It was..." "Magical?" Oliver suggested. "Human," Mia corrected. "It was so human, it made me question everything I thought I knew about animal consciousness." As the ranger finished bandaging Oliver's head, they heard a commotion from the direction of the station. Officers were emerging from the cellar, carrying evidence bags filled with documentation, tools, and, most disturbingly, small animal pelts. "They were killing the cubs," Oliver said quietly, watching the procession of evidence. "But why keep Coda alive? Why put the billboard up right where Luna would see it?" Mia shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe the billboard really was a coincidence, or maybe..." She trailed off, not wanting to voice the more sinister possibility, that someone had been cruelly experimenting not just with the cubs, but with their mother's responses. As if reading her thoughts, Oliver said, "Whatever was happening here, I think we just scratched the surface. Blackwood said it goes higher, right? There's more to this story. Mia nodded grimly. And we're going to find out what it is. But first, I want to make sure Luna and Coda are safe. The regional director approached them, his expression grave. Chen, Reed, I need your statements. This is turning into one of the biggest wildlife crime busts in the state's history. Sir, Mia said, standing up. There's a mother bear and her cub that need to be monitored. They've been through trauma, and I'm concerned about their welfare. The director considered this. We have a wildlife rehabilitation expert arriving soon. If you can help locate these bears, we can ensure they're healthy before leaving them to readjust to the wild. Oliver stood as well, wincing slightly at the movement. I can help track them. Luna still has her conservation tag from years ago. As arrangements were made for the tracking operation, Oliver and Mia stepped away from the growing crowd of law enforcement officials. In the distance, the forest stretched out, peaceful and seemingly untouched by the human corruption that had briefly invaded it. Do you think they'll be okay? Mia asked quietly. Luna and Coda? Oliver watched a bird soar over the treetops, his photographer's eye automatically tracking its flight. I think they've shown us they're stronger and smarter than we ever gave them credit for. If anyone can overcome this, they can. What neither of them could see was that, deep in the forest, in a new den far from her old one, Luna curled protectively around her sleeping cub. The trauma of captivity had left its mark on Coda. He startled at small sounds and clung to his mother more than before. But he was alive, and they were together. For Luna, that was enough. Her eyes remained alert, watching the entrance to their new home. She would not let humans take her cub again. And miles away, in an elegant office in Washington, D.C., a phone rang. A well-manicured hand picked it up, listening to the news of Blackwood's arrest and the exposure of the operation. When the call ended, the owner of the hand, a woman whose identity remained shrouded in the shadows of her dimly lit office, made another call. The Pine Ridge operation has been compromised, she said without preamble. Implement containment protocol. No one can know about Project Matriarch. The pieces were in motion. The story of Luna and Coda had captured the attention of forces more powerful and dangerous than forest predators. And while mother and cub might have found temporary safety, the human predators were just beginning their hunt. 3 days after the raid at the old ranger station, Oliver sat in the small cafe in Pine Ridge Town, scrolling through his photos on a laptop. His forehead still sported a bandage, but the headaches had mostly subsided. The local newspaper lay on the table beside him, its front page dominated by the headline, Wildlife Trafficking Ring, Busted in Pine Ridge Forest. The story had made national news, though the official version released to the press mentioned nothing about a mother bear recognizing her cub on a billboard or leading humans to the traffickers' hideout. It was presented as a routine investigation that had culminated in a successful raid. Agent Blackwood was described simply as a person of interest who was assisting with inquiries. That's one way to put it, Oliver muttered to himself, sipping his coffee. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and Mia entered, looking tired but determined. She'd spent the past 3 days dealing with various government agencies, filing reports and giving statements. She slid into the seat across from Oliver. "Any word on our fugitive agent?" Oliver asked. Mia shook her head. "Nothing. It's like he vanished into thin air. They found his car abandoned near the Canadian border, but the trail goes cold there." She lowered her voice. "And get this. According to my boss, there's no record of a Marcus Blackwood working for any wildlife protection agency. His credentials were fake." Oliver frowned. "So, who was he?" "That's what everyone's trying to figure out." Mia reached for Oliver's coffee and took a sip. The FBI has taken over the investigation. They're treating it as part of a larger smuggling operation, but... She hesitated. But what? But they're focusing entirely on the wildlife trafficking angle. Nobody seems interested in the behavioral aspects, the way Luna recognized Coda on the billboard, how she tracked him to the station. It's like they're deliberately ignoring the most extraordinary part of this whole story. Oliver closed his laptop. Have you been able to check on them? Luna and Coda? Mia nodded, her expression softening. The rehabilitation team has been monitoring them from a distance. They've established a new den about 3 miles deeper into the protected area. Coda seems physically unharmed, just traumatized. They're keeping their distance to avoid habituating them to human presence. Good. Oliver hesitated, then lowered his voice. Mia, there's something I haven't told you. Something I found in the photos I took at the station. He opened his laptop again and pulled up an image. It showed the interior of the station through one of the windows, the moment when the agent was hastily packing his bag. Oliver zoomed in on a document visible on the table beside the bag. The header was barely legible, but the words Project Matriarch, Phase 2 could be made out. Project Matriarch? Mia read aloud, her brow furrowing. What does that mean? I don't know, but look at this. Oliver switched to another photo, this one taken inside the cellar. In the background, behind the cages, a whiteboard was partially visible. On it was a crude diagram showing a bear connected by lines to a cub, with notations beside each line. Although much of it was out of frame, the visible portion included phrases like maternal recognition threshold and distance response metrics. Mia stared at the image. They were studying them, she whispered. Studying the bonds between mothers and cubs. Not just studying, Oliver corrected grimly. Testing, experimenting. What if the billboard wasn't a coincidence, Mia? What if they placed it there deliberately to see if Luna would recognize Coda? What if they were testing the limits of maternal recognition? The idea hung between them, disturbing in its implications. Mia sat back, running a hand through her hair. But why? What's the point of such an experiment? Before Oliver could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, then frowned. What is it? Mia asked. Unknown number. It just says, the coffee shop isn't safe. Check your laptop for surveillance software. Meet me at the old fire lookout tower at sunset. Come alone. Mia's eyes widened. That's cryptic and concerning. Oliver was already closing his laptop and sliding it into his bag. Could be nothing. Could be a trap. Or it could be someone with information. You're not actually thinking of going, are you? Mia looked incredulous. After everything that's happened. Oliver met her gaze steadily. Whoever sent this knows I have a laptop with me in a coffee shop. They're watching us, Mia. I'd rather meet them on my terms than wait for them to approach me when I'm not prepared. Then I'm coming with you. The message says to come alone. Mia crossed her arms. And you think that makes it less likely to be a trap? We do this together or not at all? After a moment, Oliver nodded. Fine, but we need to be careful. Let someone know where we're going, just in case. Already planned on it. Mia pulled out her phone. I'll text Rachel and dispatch. She's discreet and will know who to call if we don't check in. As they left the cafe, neither noticed the woman at the corner table who watched them go. She waited until they were out of sight, then spoke quietly into what appeared to be a normal Bluetooth earpiece. They took the bait, proceeding to Phase 3. The old fire lookout tower stood on the highest ridge in Pine Ridge Forest, offering a panoramic view of the surrounding wilderness. Once staffed during fire seasons, it had been automated years ago, the human observers replaced by cameras and sensors. The tower itself remained, a lonely sentinel against the darkening sky. Oliver and Mia parked their vehicle at the base of the trail and continued on foot. The hike would take about 40 minutes. They wanted to arrive before their mysterious contact to secure the location. "I've been thinking about Project Matriarch," Mia said as they climbed the steep trail. "What if it's not just about bears?" Oliver glanced at her. "What do you mean?" The way Luna behaved, recognizing Coda on the billboard, tracking him to the station, the emotional response she showed. It was beyond normal animal behavior. At least, beyond what we typically attribute to animals. Mia paused to catch her breath. What if they're studying the upper limits of animal cognition, pushing the boundaries of what we know about animal intelligence? For what purpose? I'm not sure. Military applications, maybe? Imagine trained animals with that level of recognition capability. Or perhaps it's more fundamental research, understanding consciousness itself. Oliver considered this as they continued climbing. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. In the valley below, the forest stretched like a dark green carpet, peaceful and seemingly untouched by human corruption. "Whatever it is," he said finally, "I don't think they had the bears' best interests at heart. Those pelts we found, they weren't just trafficking live cubs, they were killing some of them." Mia's expression darkened. Maybe the ones that didn't show the traits they were looking for. They reached the tower as the last direct rays of sunlight disappeared behind the western mountains. The structure loomed above them, its metal staircase spiraling up to the observation platform. A padlock secured the gate at the bottom of the stairs, but it hung open, recently unlocked. "Someone's already here," Oliver whispered. Mia drew her sidearm. She was still on duty and authorized to carry it. "Stay behind me." Slowly, they ascended the metal stairs, each step creating a soft clang that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet evening air. At the top, the observation platform offered a 360-degree view of the surrounding forest. A single figure stood at the railing, back turned to them, silhouetted against the fading light. "That's far enough," the figure said without turning. The voice was female, authoritative. Mia kept her weapon ready. "Who are you?" The figure turned slowly. It was a woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore hiking clothes, practical pants, boots, and a weatherproof jacket, but her bearing suggested someone more accustomed to boardrooms than forests. "My name is Dr. Eleanor Winters. Until 3 days ago, I was the lead researcher on Project Matriarch." Her gaze settled on Oliver. "And you have photographs that could expose a program the government has spent billions developing." Oliver and Mia exchanged glances. Mia didn't lower her weapon. "Why contact us?" Oliver asked. "Why not just have us detained? Blackwood seemed ready to do that." Dr. Winters' mouth twisted into something between a grimace and a smile. "Blackwood is a blunt instrument. His methods have become problematic. As for why I'm contacting you..." She paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. Because Project Matriarch has gone too far. It's no longer the research I signed up for. And you two might be the only ones who can help stop it." "Stop what exactly?" Mia demanded. "Wildlife trafficking? Animal experimentation?" "Those are just symptoms," Dr. Winters replied. "The project has evolved. It began 15 years ago as a study of maternal recognition in higher mammals. the ability of mothers to recognize their offspring across various sensory barriers. We started with primates, then moved to cetaceans, and eventually to bears due to their supposed lower cognitive abilities but strong maternal instincts. Supposed lower cognitive abilities, Oliver repeated. Dr. Winters nodded. That was our first surprise. Bears, particularly females with cubs, demonstrated cognitive abilities far beyond what our models predicted. They showed facial recognition, problem-solving skills, and emotional responses comparable to great apes. That doesn't explain the trafficking, Mia pointed out, her weapon still trained on the scientist. That came later, Dr. Winters admitted. About 5 years ago, the military became interested in our research. They saw potential applications, trained animals that could recognize specific targets, locate hidden objects or persons, operate in environments hostile to human soldiers. The project was classified and received increased funding. And the ethical oversight decreased, Oliver guessed. Precisely. Our original protocols requiring minimal harm to the subjects were gradually relaxed. We began taking cubs from their mothers to test recognition limits, keeping them separated for increasing periods. We discovered that the stress of separation actually enhanced certain cognitive functions. The mothers became more determined, more focused, more intelligent in their search efforts. Mia looked disgusted. You tortured animals to make them smarter? Dr. Winters flinched at the accusation. We were scientists following orders. Many of us raised objections, but the military liaisons were interested only in results. She turned to look out over the darkening forest. Then, 2 years ago, something unexpected happened. We had a mother bear, not Luna, another subject, who had been separated from her cub for 3 months. During a recognition test, she not only identified her cub from a series of images but used tools to access the testing chamber where her cub was held. Tools? Oliver asked skeptically. She stacked objects to reach a latch, manipulated a simple locking mechanism, and freed her cub. It was unprecedented. But the truly extraordinary moment came after they were reunited. Dr. Winters turned back to them, her expression haunted. The bear approached the observation window and made direct eye contact with me. Then she deliberately dragged her claw across her own chest and pointed at me. The same gesture, repeated 3 times. "What are you saying?" Mia asked, her weapon lowering slightly in her surprise. "I'm saying she communicated," Dr. Winters replied softly. She made the sign for hurt from American Sign Language, a gesture one of our researchers had inadvertently used repeatedly when treating injured cubs. And she attributed that hurt to me. She recognized me as the cause of her suffering. Silence fell over the platform as the implications sank in. Oliver was the first to speak. "You're claiming a bear used sign language? Deliberately?" "I know how it sounds," Dr. Winters acknowledged. "I questioned my own observation, but the incident was recorded, and it wasn't isolated. Over the next year, we documented increasing instances of what could only be described as communicative intent from our subjects. Not language as we understand it, but something emerging, something new. Where is this bear now?" Mia asked. Dr. Winters looked away. Subject 12 was terminated. The military overseers deemed her too unpredictable, too dangerous. "Because she could communicate," Oliver said, the disgust evident in his voice. "Because she could potentially tell others what we had done to her," Dr. Winters corrected. After that, the program shifted. The new directive was to study the limits of this emerging communication, while ensuring it remained contained. Some bears were selected for continued study, others were— She trailed off. "Skinned," Mia finished coldly. "We saw the pelts." Dr. Winters nodded. The trafficking operation was a cover, a way to dispose of subjects that were no longer useful while funding aspects of the project that had officially been cut. Oliver's mind was racing. And Luna? Coda? Were they part of this experiment too? Luna was a wild subject, Dr. Winters explained. Not previously studied, we wanted to test our theories with truly wild bears, to see if the cognitive enhancements we'd observed were limited to our captive subjects or represented a species-wide potential. The Billboard was placed specifically to test her recognition abilities. You stole her cub, just to see if she would recognize him on a billboard. Mia was incredulous. The original plan was to return the cub after the recognition test, Dr. Winters insisted. But then Luna showed such extraordinary awareness, not just recognizing her cub, but understanding the implied message of the billboard, that her cub was being held captive. It exceeded all our predictions. The directors decided to extend the experiment to see if she could actually locate her cub based solely on the information from the billboard. And she did, Oliver said softly. She found the station. Dr. Winters nodded, a hint of scientific wonder breaking through her guarded expression. It's remarkable. She made cognitive leaps that should be impossible for her species. She understood the concept of representation, that the image on the billboard stood for her actual cub. She inferred that her cub was being held captive somewhere nearby. She tracked complex scent trails and navigated to a location she'd never been before. And when she found the station, she demonstrated tool use by attempting to break in through the weakest point in the structure. This still doesn't explain why you're telling us all this, Mia pointed out, her weapon now lowered but still in her hand. Or what you meant about the project going too far. Dr. Winters' expression grew grave again. Because Phase 3 has been authorized. Luna has demonstrated all the markers we've been looking for: advanced recognition, problem-solving, communication potential, and most importantly, the motivation to develop these skills further. The maternal bond creates the perfect incentive system. What's Phase 3? Oliver asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. Accelerated developmental protocols. They're going to take Coda again. This time, they'll use more extreme separation methods, more sophisticated tests. They believe they can push Luna's cognitive development even further, perhaps to the threshold of what we would recognize as true language acquisition. That's torture, Mia said flatly. That's science without ethics, Dr. Winters corrected. And I can't be party to it anymore. That's why I'm here. That's why I contacted you. What do you expect us to do? Oliver asked. Dr. Winters reached into her jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. This contains everything. Research protocols, data from previous experiments, location of the main research facility, authentication codes, everything you need to expose the project. She held it out to Oliver. As he reached for it, a shot rang out. Dr. Winters jerked backward, a red stain blossoming on her jacket. She looked down at it in surprise, then back up at Oliver and Mia. "Run!" she gasped, pressing the flash drive into Oliver's hand before collapsing. Mia reacted instantly, pushing Oliver down behind the metal railing of the platform as more shots pinged off the structure. She returned fire in the direction the shots had come from, the tree line about 200 yards from the base of the tower. "We're trapped up here," Oliver said, checking Dr. Winters for a pulse and finding none. Mia scanned their surroundings. There's a maintenance ladder on the backside. It's not as exposed to their position. More bullets ricocheted off the metal framework of the tower. Whoever was shooting was using a rifle with a suppressor. The shots were quieter than they should be, explaining why they'd heard only the impact of the first bullet. Staying low, they crawled to the backside of the platform. The maintenance ladder was little more than metal rungs bolted to the support structure, leading straight down to the ground. "I'll go first," Mia decided. "Cover me, then follow." "With what?" Oliver held up his empty hands. Mia pulled a small revolver from her ankle holster and handed it to him. "Last resort only. It's got 5 shots, and you're not exactly Annie Oakley." Despite the situation, Oliver smiled. "I did win a shooting competition at a carnival once. Remind me to be impressed later." Mia holstered her sidearm and began descending the ladder. "Wait until I'm halfway down, then follow." Oliver watched her descend, counted to 30, then tucked the revolver into his belt and started down after her. The metal rungs were cold against his palms, and every movement felt painfully slow and loud. Above him, the twilight was deepening into true darkness. A small advantage, but he'd take it. He was about 15 feet from the ground when a bullet struck the metal rung just above his hand. Oliver flinched, nearly losing his grip. Below him, Mia had reached the ground and drawn her weapon again, firing toward the tree line to provide covering fire. Oliver descended the rest of the way in a controlled fall, letting gravity do most of the work while his hands skimmed along the sides of the ladder to slow his descent. He hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. "This way," Mia hissed, pulling him toward a dense stand of trees opposite the direction of the shooter. They ran, crouching low, using the growing darkness and the trees for cover. Behind them, more suppressed shots thudded into trees and undergrowth. Their attacker was firing blind now, unable to see them clearly in the forest shadows. After several minutes of running, they paused behind a large fallen tree to catch their breath. The shooting had stopped, but they could hear movement in the forest, someone tracking them. "We need to split up," Mia whispered. "I'll draw them off while you get that flash drive to safety." Oliver shook his head. "No way, I'm not leaving you." "This isn't a debate, Oliver. I'm trained for this, you're not. And that drive is more important than either of us right now." She checked her ammunition. "Head northwest. It's rougher terrain, but it will take you to the old logging road. You can follow that back to town." Before Oliver could argue further, a twig snapped nearby. They both froze, listening intently. The sound had come from the direction they'd just fled. Someone was closing in. Mia made a quick decision. She grabbed a rock and hurled it far to their left. It crashed through some underbrush, creating a distraction. Immediately, the footsteps changed direction, heading toward the sound. "Now," Mia whispered. "Go northwest. Don't stop for anything. If you hear me firing, it means I'm alive and keeping them busy." Oliver wanted to protest, but the determined look in Mia's eyes stopped him. He nodded once, then slipped away into the darkness, moving as quietly as he could through the unfamiliar forest. Behind him, he heard Mia moving in the opposite direction, deliberately making just enough noise to draw attention without revealing her exact position. A clever tactic, one that confirmed she knew exactly what she was doing. It didn't make leaving her any easier. The forest grew denser as Oliver moved northwest, the terrain becoming steeper and rockier. He relied on the faint glow of his phone's compass to maintain direction, keeping the device shielded in his palm to minimize the light. Every few minutes he would pause to listen, trying to gauge if he was being followed. After about 20 minutes of difficult hiking, he heard it. A series of gunshots in the distance, no longer suppressed. Mia had engaged their pursuer. The shots sent a spike of fear through him, but he forced himself to keep moving. She was buying him time, and he couldn't waste it. The old logging road appeared suddenly. A narrow, overgrown track cut through the forest decades ago and long abandoned. Oliver paused at its edge, scanning for any sign of danger before stepping out of the trees. The road would be faster but more exposed. a calculated risk. He had been following the road for perhaps 10 minutes when he heard an engine start up somewhere ahead. Headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the narrow track. Oliver immediately dove back into the undergrowth, pressing himself flat against the ground. A black SUV rolled slowly past his hiding place, its occupants scanning the road with flashlights. Through the vehicle's windows, Oliver could make out 2 men in tactical gear, their faces grim in the dashboard lights. They drove past without stopping, continuing in the direction he had come from, heading toward the sound of the gunfire. Oliver waited until the SUV was well out of sight before emerging onto the road again. The encounter had shaken him. These weren't ordinary poachers or corrupt game wardens. They were organized, well-equipped, and clearly prepared to kill to protect their secret. He picked up his pace, jogging along the logging road. The flash drive felt impossibly heavy in his pocket, weighed down by the responsibility it represented. Dr. Winters had died to get him this information. Mia was risking her life to ensure he escaped with it. He had to make it count. After what felt like hours, but was probably less than 45 minutes, the road widened and the trees thinned. Ahead, he could see the glow of Pine Ridge Town, its lights a beacon of civilization and safety. Oliver allowed himself a moment of relief, then froze as a new sound reached his ears, the rhythmic thump of helicopter blades. He looked up to see a black helicopter passing overhead, a powerful searchlight sweeping the forest below. It was moving toward the area where he had left Mia. These people had resources far beyond what he had imagined. This wasn't just a rogue operation. This was something with serious backing and reach. Oliver ducked under the trees again and pulled out his phone. No signal. He was still too far from town. Gritting his teeth, he continued forward, staying under the cover of the forest edge rather than on the exposed road. Finally, his phone vibrated. A signal bar had appeared. Without slowing his pace, Oliver dialed the regional wildlife director's number. "Collins," a gruff voice answered. "It's Oliver Reed," he said breathlessly. "Ranger Chen is in danger. We were ambushed at the fire lookout tower. Armed men are hunting us in the forest." There was a pause. "Where are you now?" "Approaching town on the old logging road, but Mia is still out there. I heard gunfire." "They have a helicopter, Director Collins. A helicopter and men with tactical gear." Another pause, longer this time. "Stay where you are, Reed. I'm sending units to your location and deploying search teams for Ranger Chen." "There's more," Oliver pressed. "The trafficking operation?" "It's part of something bigger, a government project called Matriarch. They're experimenting on bears, studying their intelligence. I have proof." The silence that followed was different, tense, weighted. When Collins spoke again, his voice had changed, becoming carefully neutral. "That's a significant allegation, Mr. Reed. We'll need to discuss this in person. Stay where you are. Help is coming." The call ended, leaving Oliver standing at the edge of the forest, a growing sense of unease settling in his gut. Something in Collins' tone had shifted when he mentioned Project Matriarch. It wasn't the reaction of someone hearing about a conspiracy for the first time. It was the reaction of someone who already knew. Oliver pocketed his phone and looked toward the town lights, then back at the dark forest, where Mia was still fighting for her life. He had promised to get the flash drive to safety. But if Collins was somehow involved, walking into town might be walking into a trap. As he stood there, torn between his options, a low grunt from the undergrowth beside him nearly stopped his heart. Oliver spun around, raising the small revolver Mia had given him, only to freeze in disbelief. Luna stood there, her massive form barely visible in the darkness, and beside her, safe and close to his mother, was Coda. Oliver lowered the gun slowly, not wanting to startle them. "Luna, what are you doing here? You should be miles away in your new den." As if in response to his voice, Luna took a step forward, emerging more clearly from the shadows. Her intelligent eyes fixed on Oliver with an intensity that made him shiver. She grunted again, then turned to look back into the forest, in the approximate direction where Oliver had left Mia. "Mia's in trouble," Oliver said, feeling oddly compelled to explain, despite knowing the bear couldn't understand him. "There are men with guns. It's not safe." Luna turned back to him, then deliberately pawed at the ground 3 times before looking into the forest again. The gesture was so specific, so apparently intentional, that Oliver found himself speechless. Was she trying to tell him something? Was this the communication that Dr. Winters had described? Before he could process this, Luna turned and began walking back into the forest, stopping after a few paces to look back at him. Coda stayed close to her side, occasionally glancing back at Oliver as well. "You want me to follow you?" Oliver asked incredulously. Luna grunted again and continued walking, her pace slow but purposeful. Oliver looked toward the town, then at the flash drive in his hand, then back at the retreating forms of Luna and Coda. The helicopter's sound had faded, but it would return. The men in the SUV were still out there, and Mia was somewhere in the darkness, possibly injured or captured. Making his decision, Oliver tucked the flash drive into the most secure pocket of his jacket and followed the bears into the forest. What happened next would challenge everything he thought he knew about the natural world, about the line between human and animal intelligence, and about his own capacity for belief. Because Luna wasn't just leading him randomly through the forest. She was taking him directly to Mia. Mia pressed her back against a tree trunk, controlling her breathing as she listened for her pursuers. After separating from Oliver, she had led the shooter on a winding path away from the direction Oliver had taken, firing occasionally to maintain their interest. The plan had worked, perhaps too well. What she had thought was a single hunter had turned out to be 3, and they had nearly surrounded her twice already. These weren't ordinary criminals. They moved with military precision, using hand signals and coordinated movements that spoke of professional training. When one of them had gotten close enough for her to see his face in the moonlight, she'd recognized the cold, calculating eyes of someone who killed for a living. Her ammunition was running low. She had managed to hit one of them in the leg, but it had only slowed him down temporarily. Now they were being more cautious, advancing in stages, communicating via small radio devices that emitted occasional static. The sound of a helicopter had complicated matters further. Its searchlight had passed overhead several times, forcing Mia to find increasingly dense cover. She was deep in the forest now, in an area she wasn't familiar with. Her last attempt to check her position on her phone had revealed no signal, and a battery at 12%. A twig snapped about 50 yards to her right. Mia froze, listening intently. Another sound followed, the soft crackle of a radio being adjusted. They were closing in again. Moving as silently as possible, Mia slipped away from the tree and deeper into a thicket of young pines. The dense branches provided cover but restricted her movement, making it difficult to proceed quickly or quietly. She winced as a sharp twig scratched her cheek, drawing blood. Behind her, a voice spoke, close enough to send ice through her veins. She went this way, fresh tracks. Copy that, closing in from the west. Keep her moving north toward the ravine. They were hurting her, Mia realized, driving her toward terrain that would trap her. But knowing their strategy gave her an advantage. Instead of continuing forward, she carefully backtracked, slipping through a narrow gap between 2 pursuit teams. For a few precious minutes, it seemed her maneuver had worked. The voices grew more distant as the hunters continued forward, expecting her to flee in that direction. Mia used the opportunity to change course completely, heading east toward a small stream she remembered from her forest maps. If she could reach it, she could use the water to mask her scent and trail. She had covered perhaps 100 yards when the helicopter returned, its searchlight sweeping the canopy with mechanical precision. Mia dropped to the ground behind a fallen log, pulling forest debris over herself for camouflage. The light passed directly overhead, illuminating the trees around her in harsh white light. For a moment, Mia thought she had escaped detection. Then the light stopped moving and fixed on a point just 20 yards from her position. Through the undergrowth, she could make out the silhouette of a large animal, a bear, standing motionless in the helicopter's glare. Mia's heart sank. It was Luna, with Coda beside her. The bear had frozen, caught in the open by the sudden light. Coda pressed against his mother's side, trembling visibly even from Mia's position. "Target acquired," a voice crackled over a radio nearby. "Subject M7 located with juvenile, moving to intercept." They were after Luna. This had been their plan all along, to use the commotion to locate and recapture Luna and Coda for their experiments. Mia and Oliver had been a complication, but not the primary objective. Without thinking about the consequences, Mia stood up and fired her remaining shots into the air. "Hey, over here!" The helicopter's searchlight immediately swung toward her, blinding in its intensity. Mia raised her arm to shield her eyes, knowing she had just sacrificed her position but unable to watch Luna and Coda be captured again. "Run!" she shouted at the bears, unsure if they could even hear her over the helicopter's rotor. To her amazement, Luna seemed to understand. The mother bear pushed Coda with her nose, urging him into the safety of denser trees, then looked directly at Mia for a brief moment before following her cub into the darkness. Mia had no time to marvel at this response. The helicopter was descending, and she could hear men crashing through the undergrowth toward her position. Her weapon was empty, her position exposed. There was nowhere left to run. As the first dark figure emerged from the trees, Mia prepared herself for capture or worse. Then, from behind her, came a sound that stopped everyone in their tracks, a deep, powerful roar that seemed to shake the very air. Luna burst from the forest to Mia's right, rearing up on her hind legs to her full 9-foot height. Her roar had not been a random act of aggression, but a deliberate distraction. And it worked. The men turned their weapons toward this new threat, momentarily forgetting about Mia. In that split second of confusion, something extraordinary happened. Instead of charging the armed men, Luna dropped back to all fours and ran straight to Mia. Before Mia could react, the bear nudged her roughly, pushing her toward the trees with surprising gentleness given her enormous strength. The message was unmistakable. Run. Mia didn't hesitate. She sprinted for the trees, Luna keeping pace beside her, creating a living shield between Mia and the men. Behind them, shouts of confusion mingled with the helicopter's roar. A shot rang out. Luna flinched but didn't slow. They reached the tree line together, plunging into darkness as the helicopter struggled to adjust its position to keep them in the searchlight. "Luna, you're hit," Mia gasped, seeing a dark stain spreading on the bear's flank. Luna ignored her, continuing to push forward through the forest with determined strides. She seemed to be following a specific path, leading Mia deeper into the woods, away from the pursuers, but not in a random direction. After several minutes of hard running, they reached a small clearing where Coda waited, pacing anxiously. The cub ran to his mother, nuzzling her wounded side with clear concern. Luna grunted softly, reassuring her cub, then looked at Mia as if expecting her to do something. "I don't have a first aid kit," Mia said, feeling absurdly as if she were having a conversation with the bear. "I can't help you here." Luna made a chuffing sound that almost seemed like impatience, then turned and continued walking. Slower now, but still purposeful. Coda followed immediately, and after a moment of hesitation, so did Mia. The sound of the helicopter had faded, but Mia could still hear pursuit crashing through the forest far behind them. Luna was leading them away from the hunters, taking a route that seemed designed to be difficult to track, across rocky ground, through dense thickets, and occasionally through shallow streams that would mask their scent.